the Mansion House speech last night with the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, who I'm delighted to say is here with me. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Will.
Your reaction to the GDP numbers?
Extremely disappointing. I mean, 0.1%, given that we achieved 0.7 in the first quarter, 0.5 in the next quarter. The United States 7 times as much growth in the quarter that we've just had the result for. And I think a lot of that is because this government, on coming to office, talked down the UK economy. And it did that because it had always planned to jack up taxes in the way that it has in the budget, but it wanted to make out there was a bigger problem than there was. We heard about all this fictitious black hole and so on. And we're seeing the consequences of that. And I'm quite concerned about growth going forward, actually, because if you look at the OBR forecast around the budget, it shows growth being lower across that forecast than it would have been under us back in the spring.
I mean, it's interesting you focus more broadly on the full quarter, because surely July, at least, is not on the new government. They weren't even in office by the whole month. August probably too. I mean, the third month starts to be a bit more down to them. But, you know, a lot of the first quarter of their premiership is surely not completely down to them. It's what you left them.
It doesn't take long to hit business sentiment. And we saw that in what are called PMI surveys of business confidence. And they pretty much plummeted not long after the government came into office. And I think some of that, at least, is what you're seeing feeding through. But I think the longer term is equally worrying because, of course, what the government has done is ramped up taxes on business, national insurance. That's going to depress wages, increase unemployment. It's going to lower growth. You're going to see higher inflation as a consequence and higher interest rates. And these are things that are not good as an outlook for the future, particularly when there may be shocks to the economy coming somewhere down the line. There inevitably are over a period of 4 or 5 years, which is what we're looking at. And I don't think they put the economy in the right position. And what we need now, really, is a clear plan for growth from this Chancellor.
So some of those things, of course, are true in terms of some taxes going up. Of course, there's also a lot more spending, which you would not have been able to do without similar increases in taxes and borrowing.
Well, we would have made different choices.
And not including a boost in spending.
So we would have spent and spent wisely. We would look for productivity gains to accompany that spending. So if you take health, that was exactly what Jeremy Hunt was doing as Chancellor in his last budget, was to make sure we drive up productivity. We would have also tackled welfare spending, which is spiralling ever upwards, and there are big savings to be made there. And those are choices that this government has decided to duck. And what we're seeing, partly at least, as a consequence of that, is higher taxes, higher inflation, higher interest rates and lower growth.
The total extra spending would have been lower without the same increases in tax and borrowing. That is a sort of simple fact. But in terms of what we all hope to see going forwards, of course, this quarter of GDP growth that we've just seen come in counts up till September, and the budget was in October, and we'll see the effects of the budget to come. What did you make of, I guess, the 2 key points in the Mansion House speech? One is the pooling of resources in the pension system. The other is this sort of tone, I think, of regulating for growth, not just arbitrarily against risk. Are those good ideas?
Broadly, yes. I mean, these were things that actually we were doing when we were in office. So this idea of consolidation within the pension fund marketplace is absolutely right in principle, because what it gives you is scale and the ability to get investment going, long-term investment in infrastructure and also in unlisted private equity, that kind of scale-up finance that the country really needs. So, in principle, yes. In terms of regulation, of course, it was under our government that we were bringing in changes that meant that the regulators themselves had to take into account growth around the impact of their regulations, along with actually regulating the markets that they're responsible for. So broadly, welcome. But you can't get away from the fact that I'm afraid that the one thing that Rachel Reeves didn't talk about was the budget. And that is what is really driving the concern around growth. Because, as I say, the OBR telling us that growth will actually be lower across the forecast period than it would have been under us. And that's a direct result of the choices that this government has made.
One thing she did mention was Brexit. She said, we'll not be reversing Brexit or re-entering the single market or customs union, but we must reset our relationship. A phrase that you agree with?
Well, I think, look, the EU is our biggest trading partner. So, of course, anything that we can do to facilitate trade between ourselves and them that still respects the result of the British people in 2016, is to be welcomed. So there must be no suggestion of going back into the single market or the customs union, but certainly easing trade around phytosanitary and the implications for veterinary involvement and so on, and those kind of things are important. But we also need to look more broadly across the globe as global Britain. Now, we, as a government, brought in 72 different free trade agreements, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a part of the world and a collection of countries that collectively are bigger as a market than the EU and growing faster than the EU. And of course, there will be opportunities potentially with the new administration in America to look at a US-UK trade deal as well. So we've got to look beyond Europe as well as maximising the opportunities of that relation.
What do you make of the fact that the Governor of the Bank of England also mentioned Brexit? It wasn't too specific. It didn't really get involved in the politics of things, but he did bring it up.
Well, the EU is our biggest trading partner, so he's right to make the observation that it's important that we facilitate trade as much as we can with the EU. But as I say, within that clear confines of making sure we respect the fact that we have left the European Union. But nonetheless, there will always be work to be done to make sure those trading relationships are as smooth as they can be.
Shadow Chancellor, always a pleasure to catch up. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Mel Stride with us.